This is the Chicago Daily Tribune from July 7th, 1902. Apart from the everyday news of strikes, fires and deaths, the front page featured all 4 verses of an Irish ballad written some 68 years earlier. This is the story of the Bells of Shandon. In the late 1790s, an attorney from County Cork, Richard Milliken, wrote a satirical ballad called The Groves of Blarney. Written around the melody of the same name, which was sometimes known as The Young Man's Dream, The Groves of Blarney was laced with biting sarcasm and full sentimentality, and it became quite a hit in the southwest of Ireland. A variant of The Young Man's Dream, or The Groves of Blarney, was subsequently used by Thomas Moore for his song The Last Rose of Summer, published in 1813 as part of the 5th instalment of Moore's Melodies. Both Richard Milliken and Thomas Moore, and indeed their songs, were lambasted by the caustic pen of Father Francis Sylvester Mahony, better known as Father Prout. Prout asserted with conviction that Milliken had pillaged his verses from an old Greek manuscript, and as for Moore's The Last Rose of Summer, he dismissed it outright as that never sufficiently to be encored song. And yet, in spite of his acumen for delivering in spades barbed wit and criticism, Mahony wrote a new set of sublime lyrics to fit the Groves of Blarney melody. Inspired by deep affection and recollection for the place of his birth, he christened his ballad The Bells of Shandon. Born in Cork on the 31st of December 1804, Francis S. Mahony received his formative education under the Jesuits at Clongo's Wood College in Kildare. Later studying in Amiens and Paris, where he excelled at languages, he returned to Clongo's and was appointed Master of Rhetoric. His firmly held opinions, however, soon resulted in his unceremonious expulsion from the college. Undaunted, he travelled to London and became a regular contributor to Fraser's Magazine, a prestigious journal founded in 1830 by Hugh Fraser and William McGinn. And so began Father Prout's illustrious career as satirist and journalist. If truth be told, though, Mahony's regular series of Prout's papers significantly boosted the sales of the Fraser-McGinn enterprise, Prout's musings and biting humour attracting the praise of Dickens and Thackeray. In August 1834, Fraser's Magazine published for the first time The Bells of Shandon, which Prout included in an article called The Rogueries of Tom Moore. In it, he describes St. Anne's Church and steeple at Shandon, which overlooks the River Lee, as being fashioned from grey limestone on one side and red granite on the other, like the Prussian soldier's uniform trousers, one leg blue, the other leg green. Recalling an imaginary conversation between himself and Thomas Moore, Prout tells Moore that there is nothing like returning home and hearing the long-remembered chimes of our own parish steeple. Long ago, while in Rome, I had thrown my ideas into the shape of a song, which I would sing to him to the tune of The Groves. Far from being a slow burner, the Bells of Shandon was an overnight success, thanks in part to the crooning of the celebrated Mr. Morgan Darcy, whose sentimental interpretation popularised the ballad in England and in Ireland. 2 years later, the lyrics were reproduced in the highly acclaimed Relics of Father Prout. But how exactly was it supposed to be sung? In 1844, a Mrs. Henry Morgan set Mahony's words to music, but her melody was rambling and convoluted, far beyond the reach of most singers, whether professional or amateur. The majority of singers preferred to sing the bells to the melody which accompanied Milliken's Groves of Blarney or Moore's The Last Rose of Summer. So what did Mahony himself think of his song? Well, in January 1851, he attended a party at the home of his friend and fellow journalist, Blanchard Gerald, who sang for his honoured guest the Bells of Shandon in a subdued and appropriate style. Mahony was having none of it. After expressing disappointment, indignation, and disgust at Gerald's insipid Moore-like interpretation, Mahony began singing, or rather shouting, his own version, and, to the uproarious merriment, if not to the thorough appreciation of all present. In the 1850s and well into the 1860s, Father Sylvester Mahony continued to entertain his readers with wry observation and comment, especially through his articles in The Globe. Living out the last 2 years of his life in a monastery in Paris, and having finally become reconciled to the Church, he died on the 18th of May, 1866. A few weeks later, Dublin poet Denis Florence McCarthy wrote to the memory of Father Prout, part of which read, "May the bells of Shandon toll blithe and grand on the pleasant waters of thy memory." In August of that year, singers attached to the United Irish Amateur Dramatic and Musical Society thrilled the audience at Belfast's Ulster Hall when they sang the Bells of Shandon in Irish and in 4 other languages. To mark the 10th centenary of his death, Spottiswoode & Co. of London published the final relics of Father Prout, collected and edited by Prout's old friend Blanchard Gerald. Today, the Bells of Shandon is renowned the world over and has been recorded to disc by a host of singers. No matter what the interpretation, whether crooned or indeed shouted, it will forever be associated with Francis S. Mahony's alter ego, Father Prout. And so ends the story of the Bells of Shandon. With deep affection and recollection, I oft-times think of those Shandon bells, whose sound so wildwood in days of childhood ring round my cradle their magic spells. On this I ponder, where'er I wander, and thus grow fonder, sweet Cork, of thee. With thy bells of Shandon that sound so grandin', the pleasant waters of the River Lee. I've heard bells chiming, full many a climbing, tolling sublime in cathedral shrine, while at a glybrate brass tongues would vibrate, but all their music spoke not like thine. For memory dwelling on each proud swelling of the belfry knelling its bold notes free, made the bells of Shandon sound far more grandin the pleasant waters of the River Lee. I've heard bells tolling, old Adrian's moaning, their thunder rolling from the Vatican, and cymbals glorious swinging uproarious in the gorgeous turrets of Notre Dame. But thy sounds were sweeter than the dome of Peter, flings o'er the Tiber, pealing solemnly. Oh, the bells of Shandon sound far more grandin the pleasant waters of the River Lee. There's a bell in Moscow, while on tower and kiosko in St. Sophia's the Turkman gets, and loud in air calls men to prayer from the tapering summit of tall minarets. Such empty phantom I freely grant them, but there's an anthem more dear to me in the bells of Shandon that sound so grandin the pleasant waters of the River Lee.